The moon hung low over Santa Fe, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Emily Whitlock pressed her back against the cold stone wall of her father's mansion, heart hammering beneath her dark riding cloak. The leather satchel clutched in her trembling hands contained 3 things that could destroy everything Judge James Whitlock had built: an old Colt revolver that had belonged to her late mother, 17 gold eagles she'd saved over the years, and a bundle of documents that made her stomach turn every time she thought of them. She'd found them by accident 3 nights ago. Her father had been called away to an emergency session, leaving his study door ajar. Emily had only meant to retrieve a book she'd left on his desk, but the half-open drawer had caught her eye. The papers inside bore official seals and signatures she recognized all too well. Falsified evidence, bribed witnesses, manufactured testimonies, all bearing her father's meticulous handwriting in the margins. Notes on how to ensure convictions regardless of guilt. The most damning were from a recent case, the trial of the Vane gang. 5 men sentenced to hang. Their leader, Asher Vane, condemned to 20 years hard labor in the territorial prison. Her father had called it his greatest victory against lawlessness. It had all been a lie. Emily's boots made no sound on the gravel path as she slipped through the servants' gate. Old Manuel, the groundskeeper, would be asleep in his cottage, and the house guards were making their rounds on the opposite side of the estate. She'd watched their patterns for days, planning this moment. The weight of the revolver pressed against her ribs through the leather. She'd never fired it, but her mother had taught her how to load and clean it before the consumption took her. A woman needs to know how to protect herself, Catherine Whitlock had whispered, her voice already thin as paper. Especially in a place like this, where civilization is just a pretty word men use. Emily reached the stable without incident. Her mare, Dulcinea, nickered softly in recognition. The horse was already saddled. Emily had prepared her hours earlier under the pretense of an evening ride that never happened. She ran her hand along the mare's neck, feeling the warmth beneath her palm. "Easy, girl," she murmured, though the words were as much for herself as the horse. "We're leaving this place behind." As she led Dulcinea from the stall, Emily caught sight of her reflection in the water trough. Even in the dim moonlight, she could see how different she looked from the judge's daughter who'd attended tea parties and charity functions. Her usually pinned hair hung loose beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The split skirt she wore was practical, not fashionable. The delicate lace gloves had been replaced by worn leather ones she'd hidden in the tack room months ago. She was about to mount when footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. Emily's hand flew to the revolver, but she recognized the silhouette immediately. Miss Emily Rosa, her lady's maid, stood at the stable entrance, wrapped in a thin shawl. "I thought I heard—" "Go back to bed, Rosa." Emily's voice came out steadier than she felt. "You saw nothing tonight." Rosa stepped closer, and Emily could see tears glistening on the older woman's cheeks. "I know what you found. I've known what kind of man your father is for years." She pressed something into Emily's hand, a small cloth bundle. "Dried meat and hardtack. It's not much, but the road is long to anywhere from here." Emily's throat tightened. Rosa had been with their family since before her mother died. One of the few people who remembered Catherine Whitlock as more than just the judge's beautiful, tragic wife. "He'll question you," Emily warned. "Let him." Rosa's voice held unexpected steel. "I'm just a foolish old woman who sleeps too soundly. What would I know of his daughter's comings and goings?" Emily embraced her quickly, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender water and lye soap. "Take care of yourself. You take care of yourself. Nina, your mother would be proud." Emily mounted Dulcinea in one smooth motion, a skill that would have horrified her finishing school instructors. She looked back once at the mansion that had been her prison disguised as a palace. Every window was dark except for her father's study, where a single lamp still burned. He would work until dawn, as always, crafting his version of justice with pen and paper. By the time he discovered her empty room, she'd be miles away. The road out of Santa Fe stretched before her like a ribbon of dust and shadow. Emily had never traveled it alone, never ventured beyond the town limits without a proper escort. But she'd studied maps in her father's library, memorized the stage routes and water stops. The first town was Lamy, 15 miles southeast. From there, she could catch the train to Colorado, maybe even further east, somewhere her father's influence didn't reach. As Dulcinea found her rhythm, Emily's mind raced with the implications of what she carried. The documents weren't just proof of her father's corruption. They implicated half the political establishment of New Mexico Territory. Judges, marshals, even the territorial governor's aide. Her father hadn't built his reputation alone. He was part of a network that profited from controlling who lived and who died, who prospered and who was crushed beneath the wheel of their version of law. Asher Vane's name appeared throughout the papers. She'd seen him once during the trial, a dark-haired man with eyes like winter sky, standing straight despite the shackles. He'd looked directly at her father as the sentence was read, and Emily had seen something in his expression that wasn't defeat or fear. It was knowledge. He'd known the trial was a sham, known he was being railroaded, and he'd stood there anyway with a dignity that made her father's righteousness seem like the performance it was. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Emily pulled her cloak tighter, urging Dulcinea into a steady canter. Every hoofbeat took her further from everything she'd known. Every mile stripped away another layer of the judge's dutiful daughter. She thought of her father discovering her absence, the rage that would twist his distinguished features. He'd send men after her. Of course, not the official law that would require explaining why his daughter had fled. No, he'd use the shadow network, the hired guns and bounty hunters who operated in the gray spaces between legal and illegal. But Emily had advantages they wouldn't expect. A woman traveling alone would be noticed, remembered, so she wouldn't be a woman. In her satchel, alongside the damning papers, were clothes she'd secretly purchased from a Mexican trader men's trousers, a rough cotton shirt, a vest that would hide her figure. She could shoot well enough, thanks to her mother's secret lessons. She could ride better than most men, despite years of pretending otherwise. Most importantly, she had the truth, and somewhere out there, beyond the reach of her father's corrupted justice, there had to be someone who would listen. The lights of Santa Fe faded behind her as Dulcinea carried her into the vast darkness of the high desert. Emily Whitlock, the judge's daughter, was disappearing with each passing moment. In her place rode someone new, someone her father had never bothered to see beneath the facade of feminine propriety. She'd break every rule of society, shatter every expectation that had been placed upon her since birth, because the alternative was living with the knowledge that her silence made her complicit in her father's crimes. Her mother wouldn't have stood for it. Neither would she. The first drops of rain began to fall as she reached the crossroads 5 miles out of town. Emily paused, looking back one last time at the faint glow on the horizon that marked her former life. Then she turned Dulcinea east, toward the unknown, toward a freedom that tasted of rain and dust and possibility. Behind her, in a mansion built on lies and blood, Judge James Whitlock worked on, unaware that his carefully constructed world had already begun to crumble. His daughter had taken more than money and evidence when she'd fled. She'd taken the one thing he'd never thought to guard against, the moral courage he'd tried so hard to breed out of her. The rain came harder now, washing away Dulcinea's tracks, erasing Emily's path as thoroughly as she intended to erase her father's legacy. Somewhere ahead, dawn would break on a different world. She rode toward it without looking back. The train to Colorado Springs had been running for 3 hours when it happened. Emily sat rigid in her seat, the forged papers identifying her as E. Morrison schoolteacher tucked safely in her vest pocket. She'd sold Dulcinea in Lamy, her heart breaking as the mare was led away. But a woman traveling alone on horseback would draw too much attention. The train was safer, more anonymous. Or so she'd thought. The first sign of trouble was the sudden lurch that threw passengers from their seats. Emily's hand instinctively went to the satchel beneath her skirts as the train wheels screamed against the rails. Sparks flying past the windows. They were slowing too fast, too violently for a scheduled stop. "Nobody move!" The voice that rang through the car was rough as sandpaper, carrying the authority of a drawn gun. "Hands where we can see them, and nobody has to die today." 3 men burst through the car's rear door, bandanas covering their faces, revolvers gleaming in the lamplight. Emily's blood turned to ice water, but she forced herself to remain still, to blend in with the other terrified passengers. A woman across the aisle began to sob. A businessman reached for something in his coat and thought better of it when a gun swung his way. "That's right, folks. Nice and easy." The lead robber moved down the aisle with practiced efficiency. He was tall, lean, dressed in worn leather and dust. Something about the way he moved, fluid and controlled, made Emily's breath catch. When he reached her row, he paused. Their eyes met over the bandana, and Emily found herself looking into eyes the color of winter sky eyes she'd seen once before, in a courtroom in Santa Fe. Asher Vane. The recognition was mutual. She saw it in the slight widening of his eyes, the almost imperceptible tilt of his head. He knew exactly who she was, despite her traveling clothes and false papers. For a moment that stretched like taffy. They stared at each other. Well, he said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "What's Judge Whitlock's precious daughter doing on a train to Colorado, dressed like she's running from something?" Emily lifted her chin, summoning every ounce of her mother's steel. "I could ask what Asher Vane is doing out of prison, robbing trains like a common thief." A laugh rumbled behind the bandana. "Common lady. I've never been common a day in my life." He leaned closer, and she caught the scent of leather and gunpowder. "As for prison, let's just say the accommodations didn't suit me. Your father should invest in better locks." "Vane," one of the other robbers called from the front of the car. "We got company coming, riders from the east." Asher straightened, but his eyes never left Emily's face. "That would be your father's men, I reckon. He's had bounty hunters on every train out of Santa Fe for the past 2 days, looking for a runaway daughter who took something that didn't belong to her." Emily's hand tightened on her satchel. "It doesn't belong to him either." "No," Asher agreed quietly. "I suppose it doesn't." He made a decision then, quick as a gunslinger's draw. "You want to live through this? Miss Whitlock, do exactly as I say." Before she could respond, he raised his voice to the rest of the car. "This one's coming with us. Insurance, you might say." "What?" Emily's protest was cut short by his hand on her arm, firm but not cruel, pulling her to her feet. "Trust me or die," he whispered harshly. "Those riders aren't planning to take you home for tea and scolding. Your father can't afford to have you talking to the wrong people." Through the window, Emily could see the dust cloud of approaching horses. 6 riders, maybe 7, coming fast, even from this distance. She recognized the determined set of their shoulders, the way they rode like men with killing on their minds. "Move!" Asher propelled her down the aisle. The other passengers shrank back, avoiding her eyes as if her capture was somehow her fault. Only one old woman reached out, pressing something into Emily's hand as she passed. A small silver cross on a chain. "God go with you, child," the woman whispered. They burst out of the train car into blazing sunlight. The robbers' horses waited, stamping and blowing. Asher swung up onto a black stallion that looked like it could run through hell without breaking a sweat, then reached down for her. "Can you ride?" "Better than you, probably," Emily shot back, gathering her skirts and accepting his hand. She settled behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist as gunshots cracked behind them. "Somehow, I believe that," he muttered, spurring the stallion into motion. They flew across the desert, the train shrinking behind them. Emily's carefully pinned hair came loose, streaming behind her like a banner. The other robbers flanked them, returning fire at the pursuing riders. She recognized one of them now, Jake Thornton, her father's unofficial enforcer, a man who smiled while he worked and always got results. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the thunder of hooves. "Away from here," Asher called back. "Unless you'd prefer I hand you over to those gentlemen behind us." A bullet whined past, close enough that Emily felt the air displacement. She pressed closer to Asher's back, feeling the play of muscles as he guided the stallion over the rough terrain. "They're trying to kill us both. Welcome to life outside your father's protection. Princess, it's not all tea parties and charity balls out here." They rode hard for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, following paths that seemed invisible to Emily's eyes. Gradually, impossibly, they began to pull away from their pursuers. Asher knew this land, knew every arroyo and hidden canyon. As they crested a rise, he pulled up sharply. Below them, a narrow canyon opened like a wound in the earth. Asher didn't hesitate, guiding his mount down a path that looked more suitable for mountain goats than horses. Emily bit back a scream, trusting his skill and the stallion's sure feet. When they finally stopped, deep in the canyon's shadows, Emily's legs were shaking. She slid from the horse gracefully enough but had to grab the saddle to stay upright. "You all right?" Asher had dismounted too, pulling the bandana down to reveal a face that was older, harder than she remembered from the courtroom. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw, still pink enough to be recent. "I'm fine." She straightened, brushing dust from her skirts with hands that only trembled slightly. "Though I suspect my reputation is thoroughly ruined." That earned her a genuine smile. "Worried about your marriage prospects?" "Worried about staying alive long enough to have prospects of any kind." She studied him. This man her father had tried to destroy. "Why did you help me?" "Who says I helped you?" He moved to a cluster of rocks, pushing one aside to reveal cached supplies. "Maybe I just wanted a hostage. You could have taken anyone on that train." "True." He pulled out a canteen, taking a long drink before offering it to her. "But none of them were carrying evidence that could clear my name and destroy half the territorial government." Emily's hand froze halfway to the canteen. "How did you—" "I know a lot of things, Miss Whitlock. Prison gives a man time to think, to make connections. Your father's not as careful as he thinks. Word gets around, even behind bars. When I heard the judge's daughter had vanished with certain papers," he shrugged. "Well, seemed like fate was finally dealing me a decent hand." "So you're going to take them from me?" "Am I?" He moved closer, and Emily was suddenly aware of how alone they were, how easily he could overpower her. But something in his eyes held her still. "Tell me, Princess, what were you planning to do with those documents? Take them to the federal marshals, the newspaper. Who exactly did you think would listen to a woman, even a judge's daughter, without getting you killed first?" Emily lifted her chin. "I would have found someone." "Maybe. Or maybe you'd have ended up in a shallow grave, another casualty of the territory's growing pains." He was close enough now that she could see flecks of gold in those winter sky eyes. "I'm offering you another option." "Which is?" "Partnership. You want justice? So do I. You want your father's corruption exposed, I want my name cleared and my men freed. Seems to me we want the same thing." "You're a criminal." "According to your father's court, yes. According to the truth," he smiled, sharp and dangerous, "I'm just a man who got in the way of powerful people making money." Sound familiar? Emily thought of the documents in her satchel, the careful records of bribes and false testimonies. Asher Vane and his men had been accused of robbing a Wells Fargo shipment that had been carrying government gold. But the papers suggested the gold had never existed. It was a phantom crime created to eliminate men who'd been asking uncomfortable questions about missing cavalry supplies and dead Apache scouts. "I need to think," she said finally. "Think fast." Asher moved back to his horse, checking the saddle. "Those riders will find our trail eventually. We need to move." "Where?" I know a place. Widow runs it. Asks no questions if the price is right. He glanced at her travel-worn dress. You might want to consider a change of costume, though you stand out like a peacock in a chicken coop. Emily's temper flared. I didn't exactly plan to be kidnapped by train robbers today. Rescued, he corrected. And you're welcome. By the way, though if you'd prefer, I can always take you back. I'm sure Thornton would be delighted to escort you home. They both knew that wasn't an option. Whatever Emily had expected when she'd fled Santa Fe, it wasn't this thrown into an alliance with the very man her father had tried to bury. But as she looked at Asher Vane, she remembered the dignity with which he'd faced her father's false justice. Maybe there was honor among thieves after all. All right, she said quietly. Partners, but I keep the documents. For now, he agreed. Then, softer. I know what it cost you to take them, to leave everything behind. That takes courage. Or foolishness. In my experience, they're often the same thing. He swung back onto his stallion, reaching down for her. Coming, princess. Emily took his hand, settling behind him once more. As they rode deeper into the canyon, she wondered what her mother would think of this turn of events. Catherine Whitlock had taught her daughter to shoot straight and think for herself. She probably hadn't imagined it would lead to Emily riding double with an escaped convict through the Badlands of New Mexico. Then again, Emily thought as she felt the solid warmth of Asher's back against her chest. Maybe her mother had known exactly what kind of woman she was raising. One who could see past her father's lies. One who could recognize truth, even when it came wrapped in leather and gun smoke. The canyon shadows swallowed them, and Emily Whitlock disappeared a little more with each hoofbeat. In her place rode someone new, someone her father would never recognize. A woman who'd chosen justice over comfort, truth over safety, and perhaps most dangerously of all, trust in a man the law called criminal, but who might be the most honest soul she'd ever met. The abandoned mining camp materialized out of the heat shimmer like a ghost town, which in many ways it was. Asher had led them through 2 days of hard riding, doubling back, crossing streams, using every trick he knew to shake their pursuers. Now, as the sun peaked overhead, Emily saw their destination, a collection of weathered buildings huddled against a cliff face. Silverton, Asher said, pulling up his horse. Played out 5 years ago when the vein ran dry. Nobody comes here anymore except rattlesnakes and men who need to disappear. Emily slid from the saddle, her legs barely holding her. 2 days with little rest had taken their toll, but she refused to show weakness. How long do we stay? Long enough to plan our next move. He studied the empty buildings with practiced eyes. My men should be here soon. Then we figure out how to use those papers of yours without getting us all killed. As if summoned by his words, 2 riders emerged from behind the old assay office. Emily's hand went to the revolver at her hip. Asher had insisted she wear it openly now. Easy, he murmured. They're with me. The riders were a study in contrasts. One was Mexican, compact and graceful, with silver conchos on his hatband. The other was huge, blonde, with the careful movements of a man who'd learned to control his strength. Thought you were dead. Jefe, the Mexican said, dismounting with fluid grace. Thornton's been telling everyone he put a bullet in you. Thornton couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat. Asher nodded toward Emily. This is Miss Whitlock. She's with us now. The big man's eyes widened. The judge's daughter, Vane. Have you lost your mind? Probably. Miss Whitlock. Meet Diego Morales and Eric Swenson. What's left of my gang, such as it is. Ma'am? Diego swept off his hat with old-world courtesy. No offense, but this complicates things. Everything's already complicated, Emily said. I have documents that prove you were all framed. The question is, what to do with them? Eric spat tobacco juice. Begging your pardon. Miss, but papers don't stop bullets. Your father's got half the territory looking for you. and the other half looking for us. That prison break made Asher here a federal matter. Then we need federal help. Emily said, There's a marshal in Denver, William Hayes. Asher finished. Good man. Honest as they come. Also 300 miles away through territory crawling with bounty hunters. Not to mention, Diego added, settling cross-legged on a flat rock. We got bigger problems. Thornton ain't just hunting us for your father. Word is he's working with the Presidio gang now. Asher went very still. You're sure? Saw Rico Presidio myself in Las Cruces. He was buying supplies, ammunition, lot of ammunition. Diego's dark eyes flicked to Emily. They know about the papers. They know what's in them. Emily felt cold despite the desert heat. What exactly do they know? Everything, probably. Asher pulled off his hat, running fingers through dust-caked hair. Your father wasn't just fixing trials. Princess, he was part of something bigger. Government contracts for cavalry supplies that never arrived. Weapons that disappeared between the factory and Fort Union. Apache treaties broken to clear land for men who knew where the railroad was going. The Presidio gang was in on it, Eric rumbled, moving the stolen goods south to Mexico. When we started asking questions, your father manufactured charges against us. But if they were part of it, why would they care about the documents? Because, Asher said quietly, those papers don't just implicate your father. They name names all the way up the chain. Rico Presidio's real name is Richard Presidio, and his brother is an assistant to the territorial governor. If those documents reach honest hands, a lot of powerful men hang. A rifle shot cracked across the desert, the bullet sparking off the rocks near Diego's head. He rolled sideways, drawing his pistol in the same motion. Down! Asher shoved Emily behind a water trough as more shots followed. She could see riders approaching from the east, at least a dozen men spreading out to surround the camp. So much for shaking them, Eric growled, taking position behind an overturned wagon. Asher was already moving, that dangerous grace she'd noticed on the train even more apparent now. Diego, take the high ground. Eric, watch the back trail. They'll try to flank us. What about me? Emily demanded. He looked at her, something soft flickering in those winter eyes. Stay alive. The attack came from three sides at once. Emily pressed herself against the trough, the Colt heavy in her hand. Her mother had taught her to shoot at targets, not men, but when a rider broke through their defensive line, heading straight for her, instinct took over. The revolver bucked in her hand. The rider tumbled from his saddle. Good shot. Princess, Asher called, firing rapidly at the advancing men. Your mother teach you that? Among other things, Emily gasped, trying to control her hammering heart. She'd just shot a man, probably killed him. The thought should horrify her, but all she felt was a fierce determination to survive. The firefight raged for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Diego's rifle cracked steadily from his perch on the assay office roof. Eric's shotgun boomed like thunder. Asher moved between positions, always where he was needed most. Then Emily heard it. Horses approaching from the west. More riders. They were surrounded. We're done for, Eric shouted, bleeding from a graze on his shoulder. Too many of them. But the new riders weren't attacking. They swept into the camp like avenging angels, catching the bounty hunters in crossfire. Emily saw a woman among them, riding like a Comanche warrior, her rifle spitting fire. About time, Diego called from the roof. The tide turned quickly, caught between two forces. The bounty hunters retreated, leaving their dead behind. As the dust settled, Emily emerged from cover to find Asher talking to the woman rider. Emily Whitlock, he said. Meet Maria Santos. She runs the resistance. Resistance, Emily echoed. Maria dismounted, revealing a face that would have been beautiful if not for the hardness in her eyes. Against men like your father, señorita, we've been fighting this corruption longer than Asher's gang. When we heard he'd escaped, we came looking. How many are you? Enough. Maria studied Emily with frank assessment. You're smaller than I expected. Thornton made it sound like you were some kind of Amazon. Sorry to disappoint. Don't be. Small women can go places men can't. Maria turned to Asher. We need to move. This attack was just the first wave. Presidio himself is coming with 50 men. 50. Eric whistled low. They really want those papers. No. Asher's voice was grim. They want us dead. The papers are just a bonus. He looked at Emily. This is what you signed up for, princess. Last chance to walk away. Emily thought of her father in his study, crafting his false justice. Thought of the men who'd died or rotted in prison because of his lies. Thought of her mother, who'd taught her to shoot straight in more ways than one. I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly. Except maybe to Denver with those documents. Maria laughed, harsh but not unkind. I like her. Vain. She's got spine. Her expression sobered. But Denver's impossible now. The routes are watched. There's another way, though. Which is Judge Coleman in Amarillo. He's federal, outside the territorial government's reach, and he hates your father. Maria smiled thinly. Something about losing the appointment to the territorial Supreme Court 5 years ago. Amarillo's still 200 miles, Asher pointed out. Through Presidio territory. Then we'd better get moving. Maria whistled, and her riders began gathering the horses. We'll split up, take different routes, confuse them. As they prepared to leave, Emily found herself standing next to the body of the man she'd shot. He was young, maybe 25, with a wedding ring on his finger. Her stomach churned. First kill, Asher asked quietly, appearing at her elbow. Yes. Gets easier. That's the hell of it. He studied her face. You saved yourself. No shame in that. My father would disagree. Your father would have let Thornton's men kill you to protect his secrets. You're not him, Emily. That's why you're here. She looked up at him. This outlaw who spoke of honor, who'd risked his life to save hers. What happens when this is over, when the truth comes out? We'll worry about that if we live long enough. But his hand brushed hers, brief and warm. Though I have some ideas. Vain, Maria called. Time to ride. They mounted up, Emily now on a sturdy mare Maria's people had brought. As they rode out of Silverton, she looked back once at the ghost town that had sheltered them. Regrets? Asher asked, riding beside her. No. Emily touched the satchel tied to her saddle, feeling the weight of truth inside. Whatever happens, I'll know I tried to make things right. That's all any of us can do, princess. They rode into the afternoon sun. Two forces united against a common enemy. Behind them, dust clouds marked the approach of Presidio's army. Ahead lay 200 miles of hostile territory, with only courage and conviction to see them through. Emily Whitlock was no longer running from her father's sins. She was riding toward justice, with outlaws as her allies and truth as her weapon. Her mother would have been proud, and perhaps, in the end, that was all that mattered. The chase was far from over. If anything, it had just begun. But as Emily felt the rhythm of the mare beneath her, the weight of the gun at her hip, the presence of Asher beside her, she knew she'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, she would face it head on. The judge's daughter was gone. In her place rode a woman who'd found her courage in the most unlikely place, among the very outlaws her father had tried to destroy. And that, Emily thought as they disappeared into the vast New Mexico desert, was a justice all its own. The desert had become their world. 4 days of hard riding through furnace heat and freezing nights, dodging Presidio patrols and bounty hunters. They'd split from Maria's group at Devil's Canyon, planning to reunite near Amarillo. Now it was just Emily, Asher, Diego, and Eric, moving like ghosts through a landscape of red rock and endless sky. They found the abandoned ranch house as the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. It wasn't much. Adobe walls half crumbled, a roof that showed more stars than timber. But it had a well, and they were down to their last canteen. "I'll take first watch," Diego offered, already moving to high ground. Eric tested the well rope. "Water's good. Horses need rest bad." Emily slid from her mare, every muscle screaming. She'd thought she could ride, but 4 days in the saddle had taught her the difference between Sunday rides around Santa Fe and survival. Her hands were blistered inside her gloves, her back a symphony of pain. "Here." Asher appeared with a blanket, spreading it in the corner that still had most of its roof. "You need to eat something." "I'm not hungry." "Wasn't asking." He pressed jerky and hardtack into her hands. "Starving yourself won't help anyone." She ate mechanically, watching him move around their makeshift camp, even exhausted. He had that controlled grace, checking weapons, tending horses, always aware. The scar on his face caught the firelight, and she found herself wondering how he'd gotten it. "Prison?" she asked quietly. He touched the scar, a bitter smile playing at his lips. "First week, man named Garrett thought the new prisoner needed educating. He had a knife." The smile turned cold. "Had. You killed him." "No, but he lost interest in education after I broke his arm in 3 places." Asher settled across from her, his back against the wall. "Your father visited the next day. Told me it was just the beginning unless I confessed to crimes I didn't commit." Emily's stomach turned. "He arranged it." "Probably, though men like Garrett don't need much encouragement." He studied her in the firelight. "Why are you doing this, Emily? Really, you could have just started over somewhere your father couldn't find you." She was quiet for a long moment, listening to the desert wind. "My mother died when I was 14. Consumption, they said, but I was there. I saw how quickly it took her, how the doctor wouldn't meet my father's eyes." She pulled her knees to her chest. "I think he poisoned her." Asher went very still. "Why?" "She knew things, asked questions. I found letters after she died, correspondence with a federal investigator about missing Apache treaty goods." Emily's voice was steady, but her hands shook. "The investigation died with her."
Christ.
"So you see, it's not just about justice for strangers. It's about her, about all the people he's destroyed while playing the righteous judge." She met his eyes. "What about you? What made Asher Vane start asking dangerous questions?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, I wasn't always an outlaw. Had a ranch once, small place near Massilia. Ran cattle, minded my own business. Then the cavalry started buying beef. Except half of what they paid for never made it to the forts. Apache were starving on the reservations while contractors got rich selling their rations elsewhere." "You reported it?" "Tried to. Went to the territorial authorities, even wrote to Washington." His laugh was bitter. "Next thing I knew, I was accused of rustling my own cattle. Your father presided over that trial too. I lost everything. Ranch, reputation, freedom. Only got out because Diego and Eric broke me out during a transfer." "So you became what they said you were?" "Seemed simpler than dying for nothing." He leaned forward. "But we never robbed civilians. Only targeted shipments we knew were dirty. That Wells Fargo job they pinned on us, we were 50 miles away, helping a mission town deal with typhoid." Emily pulled the satchel closer, feeling the weight of evidence inside. "These papers prove that, names, dates, everything. If we live long enough to use them." A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. Emily shivered despite the warmth of the fire. "Do you think we will live long enough?" "Honestly, odds aren't good. Presidio's got 50 men. We've got 4, counting you." 5, she corrected. "Maria will meet us." "If she makes it." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I shouldn't have dragged you into this." "You didn't. I chose." She touched his hand, brief but deliberate. No regrets. Remember? He turned his hand over, catching hers. His palm was calloused, warm. You're not what I expected, princess. What did you expect? Tears, fainting, demands to be taken home. His thumb traced her knuckles. Not a woman who'd shoot straight and ride harder than men I've known all my life. My mother's daughter, Emily said softly. More than that. He was closer now, and Emily's heart hammered for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. You're riders, Diego's warning cut through the moment. 6, maybe 7, coming from the east. Asher was moving before the words faded. Emily right behind him. They took positions at the windows, weapons ready. But as the riders emerged from the darkness, Emily recognized the lead horse. It's Maria, she breathed. The riders thundered into the ranch yard. Maria swung down, and Emily saw blood on her shirt. Presidio found our decoy group. We lost 3 good people buying time. How far behind? Asher asked. Hours, maybe less. Maria accepted a canteen from Eric, drinking deeply. But I've got news. Judge Coleman's in Fort Sumner. Circuit Court, that's only 50 miles. Fort Sumner's military. Diego pointed out, crawling with soldiers. Exactly. Maria's smile was fierce. Even Presidio won't attack a fort. We get inside. We're safe. If Coleman will see us, Emily said. He doesn't know me. Why would he trust Judge Whitlock's daughter? Maria pulled something from her saddlebag, a leather folder. Because I've got this letter from Father Martinez at the mission. He's been documenting the corruption for years, waiting for someone with authority to listen. Emily opened the folder, scanning the contents by firelight, names, dates, testimonies from people too frightened to speak publicly. It corroborated everything in her father's papers. This is enough, she said quietly. More than enough. Then we ride. Asher decided, now, rest when we're dead or safe. They abandoned the ranch house, pushing the exhausted horses through the night. Emily rode in a haze of fatigue, trusting her mare to follow Asher's stallion. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant as her father's justice. Near dawn, they stopped at a hidden spring to water the horses. Emily collapsed against a boulder, past exhaustion into a strange, floating state. She felt Asher's coat settle around her shoulders. 20 miles, he said quietly. You can make 20 miles. I can make 100 if I have to. But she leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. That's my girl. The words hung between them. Unexpected. Emily looked up to find him watching her with something that wasn't quite surprise. Am I? She asked softly. Your girl. You're nobody's but your own, he said. But when this is over, he touched her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I'd like to know what Emily Whitlock wants when she's not running for her life. I don't know, she admitted. I've been the judge's daughter so long, I'm not sure who else I am. I know. His voice was certain. You're the woman who chose truth over comfort, who rode with outlaws to find justice, who faced down bounty hunters without flinching. He smiled, and it transformed his face. You're magnificent. Asher. Hate to interrupt. Diego called. But we got dust. Lots of it. They looked back to see a brown cloud rising against the dawn sky. Presidio's army. Closer than they'd hoped. Mount up, Maria commanded. The last 20 miles became a race against death. They rode with desperate skill, horses foaming, riders bent low over necks. Behind them, the dust cloud grew larger, individual riders becoming visible. Fort Sumner appeared like a mirage, its adobe walls golden in the morning sun. Soldiers on the ramparts saw them coming, saw the pursuit behind. Open the gates, Asher shouted. Federal business! For a heart-stopping moment, Emily thought they'd be turned away. Then the gates swung open, soldiers spilling out to form a defensive line. They thundered through, horses stumbling to a halt in the parade ground. Emily half fell from her saddle, legs buckling. Asher caught her, holding her steady as an officer approached. "What's the meaning of this?" "Captain." Emily straightened, summoning the last of her strength. "I need to see Judge Coleman immediately. I have evidence of territorial corruption that reaches to the highest levels." The captain looked skeptical until Maria produced Father Martinez's letter. His face changed as he read. "The judge is in his chambers," he said slowly. "But you realize what you're claiming." "I'm claiming nothing," Emily said. "I have proof, and those men behind us will kill to stop it from seeing light." Through the gates, they could see Presidio's men pulling up just outside rifle range. 50 hard cases, armed and angry. "Sanctuary," Asher said quietly. "That's all we ask. Let the judge see the evidence." The captain made his decision. "Sergeant, escort these people to Judge Coleman, and close those gates." As they were led away, Emily looked back once. Presidio himself sat his horse just beyond the walls. A thin man with dead eyes. He touched his hat brim to her, a mockery of courtesy that promised this wasn't over. But they'd made it, against all odds. They'd reached safety. Emily swayed on her feet, and Asher's arm came around her waist. "Still standing, Princess." "Still standing," she confirmed. "Good, because the hard part's just beginning." He was right. She knew. Presenting evidence was one thing. Living long enough to testify was another. But as they walked toward Judge Coleman's chambers, Emily felt something she hadn't experienced since finding those damning papers in her father's study. Hope. The rain came down like judgment, turning the streets of El Rito into rivers of mud. Emily pressed herself against the doorframe of the Socorro Inn, watching water cascade from broken gutters. They'd been running for 2 weeks since Fort Sumner, Judge Coleman's promise of protection proving hollow when Presidio's men ambushed their federal escort. Now they were down to just her and Asher, separated from the others in the chaos of escape. "Room's ready," Asher said behind her, his voice rough with exhaustion. "End of the hall, like you wanted." Emily turned, seeing him properly for the first time in days. His clothes were torn, mud-caked. The scar on his face stood out pale against sun-darkened skin, but it was his eyes that caught her, hollow with something more than physical fatigue. "You're burning up," she said, reaching for his forehead. He caught her wrist, gentle but firm. "I'm fine." "You're not." She'd felt the heat radiating from him during their last desperate ride. "That bullet graze is infected." "I said I'm fine," but he swayed slightly, betraying the lie. The inn was nearly empty. Just them and the widow who ran it, Mrs. Chen, a woman with knowing eyes who'd taken their money without questions. Emily guided Asher up the narrow stairs, feeling him lean on her more with each step. The room was sparse but clean. 2 narrow beds, a washstand, a window overlooking the rain-soaked street. Asher made it to the nearest bed before his legs gave out. "Just need to rest," he muttered, trying to rise. "We can't stay long. Presidio." "Presidio won't move his men in this weather." Emily pushed him back down, starting on his jacket buttons. "And you're no good to anyone with blood poisoning." He was too weak to fight her. She peeled away layers of clothing until she found the wound. What should have been a healing graze was angry red, streaking infection up his ribs. Her breath caught. "That bad." He managed a ghost of his usual smile. "And here I was hoping to impress you with my rugged constitution." "Shut up." But her hands were gentle as she worked, cleaning the wound with water from the pitcher. "Why didn't you tell me?" "We had to keep moving," he hissed as she applied whiskey from his flask to the infected flesh. "Couldn't slow down." "Idiot." The word came out softer than she intended. "What good is reaching Amarillo if you're dead?" "You'd make it." His hand caught hers. "You're stronger than you know, Princess." "Stop calling me that." "Why you hate it." His fever-bright eyes held hers. or because you like it too much?" Emily's cheeks burned. She pulled her hand free, busying herself with tearing strips from a clean petticoat. "You're delirious." "Probably." He was quiet while she bandaged his ribs, but she felt his gaze like a physical touch. "Emily." "What?" "That night in Santa Fe, at your father's party, you wore a blue dress, sapphires in your hair." His voice was distant, dreamy with fever. "I was there to scout the mansion, plan our next move, but I saw you dancing, and I forgot why I came." Emily's hand stilled. "You were there, in the garden, watching through the windows." A bitter laugh. "The outlaw watching the princess, like something from a dime novel." "Why didn't you—" She stopped, realizing the absurdity. What would he have done, asked the judge's daughter to dance? 3 days later, your father had us arrested." His eyes drifted closed. "I thought about that blue dress every night in prison, wondering if you knew, what you'd think if you did." Emily finished the bandaging in silence, her throat tight. She pulled a blanket over him, then found herself brushing dark hair from his forehead. He caught her hand again, pressing it to his cheek. "Stay," he murmured. "Just stay." She should move to the other bed, should maintain the fiction of propriety that had somehow survived their desperate flight. Instead, she sank onto the edge of his bed, letting him hold her hand. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. The rain drummed harder, isolating them from the world. Emily watched Asher's face relax into sleep, the harsh lines softening. For the first time since they'd met, he looked vulnerable, young, the dangerous outlaw replaced by a man who'd once owned a ranch, who'd tried to do right before the world broke him. She dozed fitfully in the chair, starting awake whenever his breathing changed. Near midnight, his fever spiked. He tossed restlessly, muttering words she couldn't catch. Emily bathed his face with cool water, whispering soothing nonsense. "Mother." His eyes opened, unfocused. "Is that—" "No, she's gone." Recognition flickered. "Emily." "I'm here." She smoothed the cloth over his burning skin. "Rest." "Can't rest. They're coming." He tried to rise. "Have to protect—" "Shh," she pressed him back. "We're safe. The storm will keep them away." "The storm!" He looked toward the window, seeming to see something beyond the rain. "My mother loved storms, said they washed the world clean." His hand found Emily's. "She would have liked you, strong women, both of you." "Tell me about her." "Irish, came west as a school teacher, married my father against everyone's advice." A faint smile. "He was Mexican, scandalized both communities, but they were happy." "What happened to them?" "Cholera. I was 16. His grip tightened. That's when I learned the world doesn't care about happiness, only power." Emily threaded her fingers through his. "That's not true." "No." His fevered gaze found hers. "Then why are we here, two people who should never have met, thrown together by corruption and violence?" "Maybe—" She hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Maybe we were meant to meet, just not the way anyone would have planned." "Fate," he laughed weakly. "You believe in fate, princess. I believe in choices. You chose to save me on that train. I chose to trust you." She leaned closer. "We chose this." "This?" His free hand rose, cupping her cheek. "What is this, Emily?" The question hung between them, heavy as the storm outside. Emily knew she should pull away, maintain the careful distance that had kept them functioning as partners. Instead, she turned her face into his palm. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know that when I thought Presidio's men had killed you at Fort Sumner, I couldn't breathe. I know that these past weeks, running for our lives, I've felt more alive than in all my years in Santa Fe." She met his eyes. "I know that when this is over, the thought of never seeing you again is—" He pulled her down, cutting off words with his mouth on hers. The kiss was fever hot, desperate, tasting of whiskey and want. Emily's careful control shattered. She kissed him back with all the fear and longing of their terrible journey, all the might-have-beens that haunted her. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Asher's eyes were clearer. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "Shut up!" Emily kicked off her boots, settled beside him on the narrow bed. "You asked me to stay. I'm staying." He pulled her against him, her head on his shoulder. "This is highly improper, Miss Whitlock." "Good thing she's dead." Emily closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat under her palm. "There's only Emily now, and she does what she wants." "What does she want?" The question was soft, almost lost in the sound of rain. Emily listened to the storm, to his breathing, to her own wild heart. "Time," she said finally. "Time to figure out who we are when we're not running. Time to see if this thing between us is real or just shared danger." She lifted her head to look at him. "Time to live instead of just survive." "I can't offer you much," he warned. "Even if we clear my name, I'll never be respectable. Never be the kind of man who—" She silenced him with another kiss. Soft this time. "I don't want respectable. I had respectable. It was a beautiful lie built on blood." She traced the scar on his face. "I want truth. I want someone who sees me, not the judge's daughter. I want—" Her voice caught. "I want you." "Emily." Her name was a prayer on his lips. "You have me. From that first night in the garden, you've had me." They held each other as the storm raged, two souls finding shelter in the midst of chaos. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new battles to fight. Presidio was still out there. Her father's corruption still needed exposing. Justice still waited to be served. But tonight, in this shabby room in El Rito, they had the taste of rain on the wind, the warmth of skin against skin, the promise of something more than survival. Emily dozed again, waking to find the fever had broken. Asher slept peacefully, his arm tight around her waist. The storm was passing, thunder growing distant. Soon they'd have to run again. But not yet. She pressed closer, memorizing this moment. Whatever came next, she'd have this the night she stopped being the judge's daughter entirely, the night she chose love over law, truth over safety, a scarred outlaw over all the proper matches her father had planned. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper. Inside, two hearts beat in rhythm, finding peace in each other despite the storm that chased them. It was enough. For now, it was everything. The plan came together in a dingy cantina outside Santa Fe, where Emily sat disguised as a Mexican peasant woman, her face hidden beneath a rebozo. Across from her, Maria Santos spread out a hand-drawn map of the city. "Your father's hosting the territorial governor next week," Maria said quietly. "A celebration for the new courthouse. Every important official will be there." "Perfect." Asher leaned back in his chair, hat tilted low. He'd recovered from his fever, though Emily still caught him favoring his left side. Maximum exposure. Diego nodded from his position by the door. "The newspaper editor, Harrison, he's sympathetic. Lost his brother to a false conviction last year. But we need the original ledgers," Emily insisted. "The copies I took won't be enough. Father keeps the originals in his private safe." "Which is in his study, in a house guarded better than Fort Knox." Eric's massive frame hunched over his beer. "Suicide mission." "Not if we're smart." Emily pulled out her own paper, sketching quickly. "I know every inch of that house, every guard rotation, every servant schedule." She marked positions with quick strokes. "Thursday nights, Father plays cards at the governor's mansion. The house runs on skeleton staff." "You're not going in there," Asher said flatly. Emily's eyes flashed. "It has to be me. I know the safe combination." "Your father will kill you himself if he catches you." "Then we'd better make sure he doesn't catch me." She turned to Maria. Your people can create a distraction. Already planned. We'll hit the weapons depot on the other side of town. Draw most of the guards away. Maria smiled grimly. Been wanting to return those stolen Apache rifles anyway. And the witnesses? Emily asked. The ones still alive. 3 are hidden in the mountains. Diego reported. 2 more in Mexico, all willing to testify if we can guarantee protection. Judge Coleman promised federal marshals once we have hard evidence. Emily touched the pocket where she kept Coleman's written assurance. Real ones, not territorial. They refined the plan over the next days, each detail crucial. Emily would enter through the servants' entrance using her old key. Asher and Diego would provide cover outside. Eric would be with the horses for quick escape. Maria's people would handle the distraction and ensure Harrison got the documents in time for a special edition. What about after? Asher asked one evening as they camped in the hills above Santa Fe. Your father won't just accept defeat. Emily stared at the distant lights of the city that had been her whole world. Then I'll face him, in court, in public, wherever necessary. She looked at Asher. I'm done running. He pulled her close, mindful of the others around the campfire. We could go to California after, start fresh. We could. She leaned into him, allowing herself the dream. A ranch maybe somewhere with good water and tall grass. Cattle operation. Do it right this time. His voice was soft with possibility. Maybe some horses too. You could teach riding. Scandalous. A woman running a business. Haven't you heard times are changing? He pressed a kiss to her temple. Besides, I like scandalous women. The night of the plan. Emily's hands were steady as she pinned up her hair. She wore servant's clothing borrowed from one of Maria's contacts, complete with a starched apron. Just another Mexican maid going about her duties. You remember the signals? Asher checked his revolver for the 10th time. 1 lantern in the window means success. 2 means trouble. Emily touched his face. I'll be fine. You better be. He caught her hand, pressing something into her palm. A small silver ring, worn smooth with age. This was my mother's. Keep it safe for me. Emily's throat tightened. Asher. Just until tonight's over. Then you can give it back. His eyes said what his words didn't. Unless something happens. Unless we don't make it. She slipped the ring onto a chain around her neck, tucking it beneath her blouse. I'll see you at the rendezvous. The walk to her father's house felt both endless and too quick. Emily slipped through shadows, every nerve screaming danger. But the streets were quiet, most of the city guard racing toward the explosions at the weapons depot. The servants' entrance was unlocked, as always. Emily moved through familiar halls, transformed by darkness into enemy territory. She could hear the skeleton staff in the kitchen, preparing for the judge's late return. Her father's study stood empty, lamplight from the street filtering through heavy curtains. Emily went straight to the portrait of her mother that concealed the safe. Her fingers found the combination without conscious thought. Her mother's death date, a macabre touch typical of James Whitlock. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, stacks of ledgers detailed years of corruption. But it was the bottom shelf that made Emily's breath catch. Letters, dozens of them, including several in her mother's hand. She scanned one quickly, her world tilting. Catherine Whitlock hadn't just suspected corruption. She'd been gathering evidence, planning to expose it all. The last letter was dated 2 days before her sudden illness. Murderer, Emily whispered, fury burning cold in her chest. Footsteps in the hall. Emily stuffed the ledgers and letters into her bag, closed the safe, spun the portrait back into place. The study door opened as she turned. Jake Thornton stood framed in the doorway, smiling his killer's smile. Well, well, the prodigal daughter returns. Emily's hand went to her hidden revolver. Mr. Thornton, still doing father's dirty work. Among other things. He stepped inside, closing the door. He's been expecting you, said you'd come for the ledgers eventually. Then he knows why I'm here. Oh, he knows. Question is, does he want you brought back alive or dead? Thornton moved closer, hand resting on his gun. He wasn't specific. Probably because he wants to kill me himself. Emily shifted her weight, calculating angles. He always did prefer handling family matters personally. True enough, your mother found that out. The confirmation hit like a physical blow, but Emily didn't let it show. How much did he pay you to poison her? Wasn't me. Doc Morrison handled that. I just made sure the servants didn't ask questions. He was close now, close enough that Emily could smell whiskey and tobacco. Your father's a thorough man. He's a monster. Maybe, but he's a rich monster who pays well. Thornton's hand moved to his gun. Nothing personal. Miss Emily. Emily shot him through her apron pocket. The small derringer Asher had given her as backup barked once, twice. Thornton staggered back, red spreading across his chest. That's for my mother, Emily said quietly. Thornton fell, knocking over a lamp. Fire spread across the carpet as oil spilled. Emily grabbed her bag and ran, smoke already filling the hallway. Behind her, shouts erupted as the staff discovered the flames. She burst from the house to find chaos in the street. The fire spread quickly in the dry wood. Asher materialized from the shadows, pulling her toward the waiting horses. The whole damn house is going up. Good. Emily clutched the bag of evidence. Let it all burn. They rode hard for the newspaper office, where Harrison waited with his typesetters. Emily handed over the ledgers, keeping her mother's letters. Those were personal. This is enough to destroy them all. Harrison breathed, scanning the pages. Judge Whitlock, the governor's office, half the territorial government. Then destroy them, Emily said. Every last one. By dawn, special editions hit the streets. By noon, federal marshals were arresting officials across Santa Fe. Judge James Whitlock was taken into custody at the governor's mansion, still in his evening clothes, denying everything even as witnesses came forward. Emily stood on a hill overlooking the city, watching smoke rise from the ruins of her childhood home. Asher stood beside her, solid and sure. It's done, she said quietly. The easy part is... He took her hand. Trials will take months, years maybe. I know. She pulled out his mother's ring, holding it up to the light. I believe this belongs to you. Keep it. He closed her fingers around the silver band. If you want to. Emily looked at him. This man who'd been labeled outlaw but showed her what honor really meant, who'd risked everything for justice, who'd given her the strength to face her father's evil. Ask me properly, she said. A slow smile spread across his face. He dropped to one knee there on the hillside, taking her hand. Emily, whatever your name is now, will you marry a reformed outlaw with a questionable past and uncertain future? Yes, she pulled him up, kissing him soundly. But only if he promises to stay reformed. Mostly. Mostly, he agreed against her lips. Below them, Santa Fe churned with change. The old order collapsed as truth finally saw daylight. It would be messy, painful, but necessary. Emily turned her back on it all, facing west where mountains promised new beginnings. She'd return for the trials, speak her truth in court, but after that, California waited. A ranch with good water and tall grass, a life built on honesty instead of lies. Ready? Asher asked. Emily looked at the man she'd chosen, the future she'd fought for, the freedom she'd earned. I've been ready my whole life. They mounted their horses and rode toward the setting sun, leaving the judge's daughter buried in the ashes of Santa Fe. Only Emily remained. Just Emily, with her mother's courage, her own hard-won wisdom, and a ring that promised tomorrow would be different from all the yesterdays that came before. Behind them, smoke rose like incense to the sky, carrying away the old corruptions, Ahead lay unmarked trails and unwritten stories. It was enough. It was everything. It was just the beginning. The grand hotel ballroom glittered with the light of 100 candles, crystal chandeliers casting rainbows across the assembled elite of Santa Fe. Emily stood at the servants' entrance, her heart hammering beneath the white silk gown she'd borrowed from Maria's cousin. 3 weeks had passed since the arrests began, and tonight, Judge Whitlock was hosting his final desperate play, a gala to shore up support among those still loyal to the old regime. "You don't have to do this," Asher murmured beside her, devastating in his borrowed evening wear. "The federal prosecutors have enough evidence." "They have papers," Emily corrected. "Tonight, they'll have witnesses. People who've been too frightened to speak will find courage when they see me stand against him." Through the doorway, she could see her father holding court, still playing the wronged patrician. His supporters clustered around him, those whose crimes hadn't yet been exposed, who hoped his influence might save them. "Harrison's here," Diego reported from his position near the main entrance. "So are the federal marshals. They're waiting for your signal." Emily touched the stack of documents hidden in her reticule, copies of her mother's letters. Proof of murder to add to the corruption charges. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. She entered through the main doors, Asher at her side. The effect was immediate. Conversation died like a wave across the room. Judge James Whitlock turned slowly, his face going pale, then flushing with rage. "Emily," he said her name like a curse. "You dare show your face here?" "I dare a great deal more than that." "Father." She walked forward, aware of every eye upon her. "I've come to finish what Mother started." "Your mother was a fool who couldn't mind her own affairs." His voice carried clearly in the silent ballroom. "Just like you." "My mother was murdered." Emily pulled out the letters. "I have her correspondence with Federal Investigator Grant, detailing your crimes. Her last letter mentions feeling suddenly ill after confronting you." She looked around the room. "Dr. Morrison, are you here? I believe you have something to confess." The elderly doctor shrank back against the wall, but Emily pressed on. "Arsenic. Wasn't it small doses in her evening tea? Father always insisted she take it for her nerves." "Lies." Judge Whitlock stepped forward. "The ravings of a wayward daughter who consorts with criminals." "Criminals you created." Asher spoke for the first time. "Men you framed to cover your theft." "You're Asher Vane." Whitlock's hand moved toward his jacket. "There's a warrant." "Was a warrant?" Federal Marshal Coleman entered from the side door. "Mr. Vane has been fully pardoned based on new evidence. Evidence your daughter courageously provided." The room erupted in whispers. Emily saw allies melting away from her father's side, rats abandoning a sinking ship. "Furthermore," Coleman continued, "I have warrants for the arrest of several people in this room. Dr. Morrison. Mr. Thornton's testimony before his death implicates you in Catherine Whitlock's murder." The old doctor broke. "He made me do it, said he'd ruin me if I didn't. I'm sorry. God help me. I'm sorry." 2 marshals led the sobbing doctor away. Emily watched her father's face contort with fury. "You stupid girl," he snarled. "You've destroyed everything our name, our position, built on blood and lies." Emily stepped closer. "You taught me that justice was sacred. Father, you just never expected me to apply that lesson to you." "I gave you everything: education, status, comfort. You gave me a prison painted gold. You killed my mother. You destroyed innocent men." Her voice rose. "You made me complicit in your crimes by my silence." More people were leaving now. Scandal too rich even for Santa Fe society. But some remained, and in their faces, Emily saw the recognition she'd hoped for. The understanding that if Judge Whitlock's own daughter would stand against him, perhaps they could find courage too. Mrs. Valdez. Emily called to a widow whose husband had died in prison on false charges. Would you like to tell Marshal Coleman what my father demanded in exchange for your husband's freedom? The widow stepped forward, trembling but determined. He wanted the deed to our land, said my husband would hang unless I signed it over. Mr. Chen. Emily turned to the merchant. The protection money you've been paying. One by one, they came forward. Years of suppressed grievances pouring out in a flood of testimony. Judge Whitlock stood frozen, watching his empire crumble. Enough. He pulled a derringer from his jacket, pointing it at Emily. You've said enough, you little... Asher moved faster than thought, stepping between them as the gun fired. The bullet caught him high in the shoulder, spinning him around. Emily caught him as he fell, red spreading across his white shirt. No, she pressed her hands to the wound, feeling hot blood between her fingers. Asher, stay with me. Judge Whitlock stood frozen, gun still raised. Marshal Coleman's weapon was already out. Drop it, Whitlock. The judge looked at his daughter, kneeling in Asher's blood, and something flickered in his eyes. Regret or just calculation. The gun swung toward his own temple. Father, don't. The second shot was louder than the first. Judge James Whitlock crumpled, his reign of terror ending with brutal finality. Emily barely noticed, focused on Asher's pale face. Hey, princess, he managed, trying to smile. Seems like I'm always bleeding on your nice dresses. Shut up! Tears ran down her face as she pressed harder on the wound. Doctor, we need a doctor. Not Morrison, Asher joked weakly. Doctor... Harriet Blackwood pushed through the crowd, one of the few female physicians in the territory. Move aside. Let me work. The next hour blurred together. Asher taken away on a stretcher. Emily giving her statement to the marshals, blood still on her hands. Maria appearing with a cloak and gentle words. The ballroom emptying until only ghosts remained. Emily found herself in the courtyard where her mother used to grow roses. The bushes were dead now, neglected since Catherine's death. She sank onto a stone bench, suddenly exhausted. He'll live. Doctor, Blackwood said, appearing beside her. The bullet missed anything vital. Your young man is tough. He's not... Emily stopped, realizing the protest was meaningless. Thank you. Your mother would be proud. The doctor settled beside her. Catherine and I were friends once, before your father isolated her. She paused. I suspected the poisoning but was too cowardly to speak up. I'm sorry. You're speaking now, Emily said quietly. That matters. They sat in silence, watching stars appear above Santa Fe. Inside, federal marshals cataloged evidence from the judge's study. Tomorrow, more arrests would follow. The trials would be lengthy, painful, but necessary. What will you do now, Doctor? Blackwood asked. Emily touched the ring on its chain, thinking of Asher lying wounded because he'd protected her. Again. Heal, she said. Then build something new, something clean. Dawn was breaking when she finally went to Asher. He was awake, propped up in bed at the doctor's house, looking irritated at his confinement. Took you long enough, he grumbled. Do you know how boring Diego is as a nurse? I heard that. Diego called from the next room. Emily sat on the bed's edge, taking his hand. You could have died. Worth it. He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Though I'd prefer our wedding without bullet holes. Is that a proposal? I already proposed. You said yes. He pulled her down for a gentle kiss. Unless you're having second thoughts about marrying a frequently shot reformed outlaw. Never. She curled against his good side, careful of the bandages. Though you have to stop getting shot. It's becoming a bad habit. I'll work on it. They lay together as the sun rose over Santa Fe, painting the walls gold. It was a new day in more ways than one. The old order was dead, buried with Judge Whitlock. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but full of possibility. California, Asher asked softly. After the trials, after we see justice done. Emily closed her eyes. Then yes, California, that ranch with good water and tall grass. He finished. I love you, Emily, whoever you are now. Just Emily, she said. Emily Vane, eventually, and I love you too. Outside, church bells began to ring, calling the faithful to morning prayer. But Emily had found her own salvation in truth, in courage, and in the arms of a man who'd taught her that sometimes the law and justice weren't the same thing. The judge's daughter was truly dead now, buried with her father's empire of lies. In her place was a woman who'd chosen her own path, whatever the cost. And as she drifted off to sleep beside the man she loved, Emily knew that price had been worth paying. Justice had been served, not in the way her father had taught, but in the way her mother would have understood. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. The morning papers screamed the news across their front pages. Judge Whitlock dead. Corruption empire exposed. Daughter's brave stand brings justice. Emily stood at the window of the boarding house, watching Santa Fe transform before her eyes. Federal marshals were everywhere, making arrests, seizing documents, dismantling the network her father had spent decades building. You should eat something, Asher said from the bed, his shoulder still bandaged but healing well. You've been standing there for an hour. I'm watching it fall apart, she said quietly. Everything he built, everything he killed for, gone in a single night. Good riddance. He shifted, wincing slightly. Though I'd rather watch it with you over here. She turned, managing a small smile. Doctor, Blackwood said you need rest. I need my future wife more than rest. He patted the bed beside him. Come here, princess. You look ready to collapse. Emily went to him, sinking down carefully on the bed's edge. The past days had been a whirlwind of depositions, testimonies, and revelations. Each turned stone revealed new horrors, new victims of her father's regime. A knock at the door interrupted them. Diego entered with Marshal Coleman and a man Emily didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, with the bearing of authority. Miss Whitlock, Coleman said. This is Federal Prosecutor Nathan Hayes from Washington. He's taking over the cases. Hayes stepped forward, his eyes assessing. Miss Whitlock, your testimony has been invaluable. However, we need more. There are still powerful men claiming your father acted alone. He didn't, Emily said firmly. I have names, dates, amounts, but some of the evidence burned with the house. We recovered more than you might think. Hayes pulled out a leather folder. Your father's safe survived the fire. We found these. Emily took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were documents she'd never seen, contracts, correspondence, bank records. Her father's entire network laid bare in his own meticulous handwriting. There's more. Hayes continued. Governor Morrison has agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. He's confirming everything you've said and adding details we didn't know. Rats fleeing the ship, Asher muttered. Perhaps, but useful rats. Hayes focused on Emily again. Miss Whitlock, I need to ask, are you prepared for what comes next? These trials will be brutal. Your father's associates will try to destroy your credibility, paint you as a hysterical woman, a daughter gone mad with grief. I know. Emily's chin lifted. I'm ready. There's something else, Coleman added reluctantly. Your father's will. It seems he changed it recently, leaving everything to charitable institutions. You've been completely disinherited. Emily laughed, surprising them all. Of course he did. One last attempt at control. She looked at Asher. Good thing I never wanted his blood money anyway. The next weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Emily worked closely with the prosecutors, detailing every memory, every overhead conversation, every suspicious visitor to her father's study. Asher recovered slowly, chafing at his confinement but supporting her through the long days. When the trials began, Santa Fe had never seen anything like it. The courthouse overflowed with spectators, journalists from as far as New York cramming in to witness the territory's reckoning. Emily took the stand on a blazing Tuesday morning, facing a courtroom packed with her father's former allies. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor instructed. "Emily Catherine Whitlock." Her voice carried clear and strong. "Miss Whitlock, tell us about the night you discovered your father's crimes." Emily began to speak, laying out the truth with surgical precision. She told them about the falsified documents, the bribes, the innocent men condemned. She spoke of her mother's murder, producing Catherine's letters as evidence. She named names, cited dates, exposed the whole rotten structure. The defense attorney, a sharp-faced man named Clemens, tried to shake her during cross-examination. "Miss Whitlock, isn't it true you've been living as an outlaw these past months, consorting with criminals?" "I've been surviving attempts on my life," Emily corrected. "And the men you call criminals were victims of my father's corruption." "You expect us to believe a young woman's word against established pillars of society?" "I expect you to believe evidence, documents, witnesses, the truth. Truth from a woman who betrayed her own father." Emily's eyes blazed. "My father betrayed every principle of justice he swore to uphold. He murdered my mother. He destroyed innocent lives for profit. If standing against that is betrayal, then yes, I am guilty." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Emily saw faces in the gallery, women who'd lost husbands, children who'd lost fathers, all to her father's false justice. "Furthermore," she continued, "I'm not asking you to believe just me. Listen to the dozens of witnesses who've come forward. Look at the evidence recovered from my father's own safe. See the truth that's been hidden for so long?" The defense tried other tactics, questioning her mental state, her relationship with Asher, her motives. But Emily remained unshakable, answering each attack with calm precision. When she finally stepped down after 3 days of testimony, the courtroom erupted. Some called her a hero, others a traitor. But the damage was done. Her testimony, combined with the mounting evidence, created an avalanche that buried the old regime. One by one, they fell. The governor, indicted on 50 counts of corruption. The territorial secretary, exposed for selling government positions. Judges, marshals, businessmen, all tangled in the web her father had woven. Rico Presidio tried to run, making it as far as the Mexican border before federal agents caught him. His trial revealed the extent of the smuggling operation. Weapons and supplies stolen from the army and sold to the highest bidder while Apache starved on reservations. Through it all, Asher was there. He testified too, cleared now of all charges, telling his story of persecution and false imprisonment. His men were freed, their names restored. Justice, real justice, was finally being served. But it came at a cost. Emily received death threats, anonymous letters promising vengeance. Windows at the boarding house were broken. Once, a shot barely missed her as she left the courthouse. "We should leave," Asher urged after that incident. "You've done enough. Let others finish this." "No." Emily's jaw set stubbornly. "I see this through to the end, all of it." The end came on a December morning. Snow dusting the streets of Santa Fe. The final verdicts were read guilty. Across the board, the territorial government would be restructured under federal oversight. New judges, honest ones, would be appointed. The machinery of corruption that had ground up so many lives was finally, officially, broken. Emily stood outside the courthouse, breathing in cold, clean air. Asher wrapped his coat around her shoulders, pulling her close. "It's done," she said, hardly believing it. "Your mother would be proud." "I hope so." She leaned into his warmth. "What happens now?" "Now." He turned her to face him. "Now we live. We build that ranch, raise those horses, create something good and clean and true. In California, wherever you want, though I hear Colorado's nice too, or maybe Texas." Emily smiled, the first real smile in months. "Somewhere new, somewhere that's ours." "Speaking of which," he pulled out a folded paper. "Diego brought this from a lawyer in San Francisco." Emily read quickly, her eyes widening. "This is a deed to a ranch in the Sacramento Valley." "Wedding present from Maria and the others. They pooled their reward money from testifying." He grinned. "Seems we have friends who want us to have that fresh start." Tears blurred her vision. After so much darkness, the kindness overwhelmed her. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow, if you're ready. Judge Coleman agreed to marry us this afternoon. Small ceremony. Just our friends." He cupped her face gently. "Unless you want something more traditional." "No." She kissed him, tasting promise and possibility. "I've had enough of tradition. I just want you." That afternoon, in Judge Coleman's chambers, Emily Whitlock became Emily Vane. She wore a simple blue dress, her mother's, saved from the fire by Rosa. Asher had found a proper suit somewhere, looking uncomfortable but handsome. Diego stood as best man, Maria as maid of honor. "By the power vested in me by the federal government," Coleman intoned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Asher kissed her as their friends cheered, and Emily felt the last chains of her old life fall away. She was no longer the judge's daughter, no longer bound by corruption and lies. She was just Emily Vane, starting fresh with the man who'd shown her what real justice looked like. As they walked out into the snowy afternoon, Emily looked back once at Santa Fe, the city that had been her prison and her battleground. Then she turned west, toward new horizons, her hand in Asher's. "Ready for that adventure, Mrs. Vane?" "I've been ready all my life, Mr. Vane." They climbed into the waiting wagon, loaded with supplies for their journey. As they rode out of Santa Fe, Emily heard church bells ringing, whether for a wedding, a funeral, or just the hour. She didn't know, but they sounded like freedom to her, like the promise of all the tomorrows stretching ahead. The judge's daughter was dead and buried. Emily Vane was just beginning to live. 6 months had passed since the trials ended. Emily stood on the porch of their ranch house in California's Sacramento Valley, watching the sun paint the hills gold. The property Maria and the others had gifted them was everything they'd dreamed. Rolling pastures, a clear stream, and good soil for the garden she'd started. "Letter came," Asher said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. His shoulder had healed completely, leaving only a faint scar to join the others. "From Marshal Coleman." Emily took the letter, recognizing the official seal. She read quickly, her expression darkening. "There's been an appeal. Several of the convicted men are claiming the trials were tainted by hysteria and feminine vindictiveness." "They're desperate." Asher set down his cup, pulling her close. "The evidence was solid." "But they have new lawyers, expensive ones from back east." She folded the letter, fighting the familiar knot of anxiety. "Coleman says they're particularly targeting my testimony, claiming I was motivated by greed and mental instability brought on by my father's death." "Will you go back?" Emily was quiet for a long moment, watching their horses graze in the pasture. They'd built something good here, a small but thriving ranch. Honest work, clean money. Their nearest neighbors, the Yamaguchi family, had become dear friends. She'd even started teaching writing to local children, scandalizing and delighting the valley in equal measure. "I have to," she said finally. "If I don't defend my testimony, some of them might go free." "Then we go back." Asher's voice was firm. "Together." "The ranch." "We'll survive a few weeks. Tom Yamaguchi already offered to look after the stock." He turned her to face him. "You stood alone against them once. Never again." 3 days later, they were on the eastbound train. Emily wore her traveling suit, the pearl-handled Colt .32 tucked in her bag. Old habits died hard. Asher had strapped on his gun belt for the first time in months, the weight of it changing his posture back to the dangerous man she'd first met. "Feels strange," he admitted as the California hills gave way to desert. "Going back to that world." "It's not the same world." Emily laced her fingers through his. "We changed it." But as they neared New Mexico territory, she wondered if that were true. The letters from Coleman had grown increasingly worried. Money was flowing in from somewhere, funding the appeals, bribing witnesses to recant, painting the trials as a witch hunt led by a vengeful daughter. They arrived in Santa Fe to find the city divided. Federal oversight had improved much, but old loyalties died hard. Emily saw it in the looks they received, heard it in the whispers that followed them down the street. "The nerve of her, coming back here." Destroyed good men with her lies, living in sin with that outlaw for months before they married. Emily kept her head high, but each word stung. This was the cost of breaking the machine. Those who'd benefited from it would never forgive her. Coleman met them at the federal building, looking older than she remembered. "Thank God you came. 3 witnesses have already disappeared. 2 more recanted their testimony after their families were threatened." "Who's funding this?" Asher demanded. "We're not sure. The money's coming through Eastern banks. Impossible to trace. But whoever it is has deep pockets and a strong interest in discrediting the original trials." Emily studied the files Coleman provided. The new legal team was formidable. Harvard-educated lawyers who specialized in appeals. Their strategy was clear paint her as a hysterical woman who'd manufactured evidence to steal her father's fortune and elevate her outlaw lover. "They're requesting a new trial for all convicted parties," Coleman explained. "If they succeed in discrediting you, the whole house of cards could fall." "Then we make sure they don't succeed." Emily's voice was steel. "When's the hearing?" 3 days. They've subpoenaed you, of course, and they've been spreading rumors, trying to poison the jury pool." Coleman hesitated. "There's something else. They've hired a new investigator, someone who claims to have evidence that you forged documents." "That's impossible. Everything I provided was genuine." "I know that, but they're building a narrative. The wronged daughter, driven mad by grief, creating elaborate forgeries to destroy her father's legacy." He met her eyes gravely. "They're very good at what they do." The next days were a blur of preparation. Emily went over every piece of evidence again, reinforcing her memories, preparing for the assault she knew was coming. Asher never left her side, a solid presence in the storm. The night before the hearing, they walked through the plaza where months ago she'd exposed her father's crimes. The hotel where the confrontation had occurred had been rebuilt, grander than before. New money was flowing into Santa Fe, drawn by the federal presence and promise of honest government. "Do you regret it?" Asher asked suddenly. "Everything we gave up for this?" Emily considered. They could have run, disappeared into the frontier, built their ranch without ever looking back. Instead, they'd chosen to fight, to testify, to see justice done. "No," she said firmly. "The truth matters. What we did matters. Even if they undo it all." "They won't." She touched the ring on her finger, his mother's ring that she now wore proudly. Because the truth has a way of surviving, even when powerful men try to bury it. The hearing convened in the same courthouse where her father had dispensed his twisted justice. Emily took her seat, aware of the hostile faces in the gallery. The lead attorney for the appellants was Marcus Rathbone, a thin man with predatory eyes and a reputation for destroying witnesses. "Miss Whitlock," he began, deliberately using her maiden name. "Or should I say, Mrs. Vane. You seem to have difficulty with consistent identity." "My name is Emily Vane," she replied calmly. "I married Asher Vane 6 months ago." "Yes, the outlaw you claim was falsely imprisoned. Convenient, wasn't it, marrying your co-conspirator?" "Objection." The federal prosecutor called. Mr. Vane was fully exonerated by testimony provided by his now wife. Rathbone smiled coldly, hardly unbiased. For hours, he attacked. Every detail of her story was questioned, twisted, reframed. He produced affidavits from people claiming she'd been unstable since childhood. He suggested she'd forged documents using her father's handwriting, which she knew so well. He painted Asher as a manipulator who'd seduced a grieving daughter for revenge. But Emily had faced worse than clever lawyers. She'd faced her father's killers, survived desert chases, stood against an empire of corruption. She answered each attack with calm precision, never losing composure. "You claim your father had your mother poisoned," Rathbone pressed. "Yet you lived in his house for years afterward. Why didn't you report it then?" "Because I was 17 and terrified. Because he controlled everything and everyone around me. Because I didn't have proof until I found my mother's letters. Letters that conveniently appeared just when you needed them. Letters that were hidden in my father's safe, along with the other evidence of his crimes, evidence that federal investigators verified as authentic. Investigators working with limited resources, eager to close cases, perhaps too eager to question a grieving daughter's story. On it went, Rathbone chipping away, trying to find cracks in her testimony. But Emily had learned strength in unlikely places, from her mother's hidden courage, from Asher's unbending honor, from her own choice to stand for truth regardless of cost. When Rathbone finally finished, Emily was exhausted but unbroken. The federal prosecutor rose for redirect, but she caught his eye, shaking her head slightly. She had something to say. "Your Honor," she addressed the judge. "May I make a statement?" The judge, a federal appointee brought in from Colorado, nodded, briefly. "Mrs. Vane." Emily stood, facing not the lawyers but the gallery full of Santa Fe citizens. "I understand why some of you hate me. My father's system benefited many, even as it destroyed others. Change is frightening. Truth can be painful." She saw faces in the crowd, some hostile, some uncertain, a few sympathetic. "But I ask you to remember the victims, the men who died in prison for crimes they didn't commit, the families destroyed by false accusations, the Apache who starved while their supplies were sold for profit, my mother, murdered for asking questions." Her voice grew stronger. "Yes, I testified against my father. Yes, I helped bring down men you might have respected. But I did it because someone had to, because silence in the face of injustice is complicity." "Mrs. Vane," the judge warned. "I'm almost finished, Your Honor." Emily looked directly at Rathbone. "You can attack me, discredit me, paint me as anything you like, but you cannot change the truth. The documents are real, the crimes happened, and no amount of expensive lawyers can make that disappear." She sat down in ringing silence. Then, from the back of the gallery, someone started clapping. An old Mexican woman Emily recognized, someone who'd lost a son to false imprisonment. Others joined her. Not many, but enough. "Order!" The judge banged his gavel. "I'll render my decision tomorrow. Court is adjourned." As they filed out, Asher took Emily's arm. "That was magnificent." That was necessary. But she leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. That night, in their hotel room, they held each other close. Tomorrow would bring the judge's decision, whether the appeals would proceed, whether the convictions would stand, whether their fight had been for nothing. "Whatever happens," Asher murmured against her hair, "I'm proud of you. Your mother would be too." "I know." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the day. "I just hope it's enough." "It is." His arms tightened around her. "The truth is always enough, in the end." Outside their window, Santa Fe slept fitfully, a city caught between its past and future. Emily thought of their ranch in California, of the life they'd built, of the peace they'd found. Part of her wanted nothing more than to return to it, to leave this fight to others. But she'd learned something in these months of trial and testimony. Justice wasn't a single victory. It was a constant choice, a daily decision to stand for what was right even when it cost everything. Tomorrow, she would stand again, and again after that, if necessary, because that's what her mother would have done. That's what the woman she'd become demanded. The judge's daughter was dead. Emily Vane lived, and she would not be silenced. The night was clear and cold atop Cathedral Rock. The lights of Santa Fe spread below like fallen stars. Emily stood at the edge, her coat pulled tight against the desert wind. Somewhere in those lights was the courthouse where tomorrow the federal judge would announce whether the appeals could proceed, whether everything they'd fought for would crumble. "Found you," Asher said softly, emerging from the shadows. He carried a blanket and a flask, knowing her habits after all these months. "Diego's looking for you. Says you missed dinner." "I wasn't hungry." She accepted the blanket gratefully as he wrapped it around them both. "I used to come here as a girl, when Father's world became too much. And now I come here to remember why we fought." She pointed to the city below. "Every light is a family. Some lost fathers, sons, husbands to my father's corruption. Others profited from it. Tomorrow decides which voice wins." Asher pulled her closer, pressing the flask into her hands. "Whatever happens, we did what was right." "Did we?" Emily took a sip, feeling whiskey burn down her throat. "Sometimes I wonder if we just traded one form of violence for another. How many families were destroyed when those men went to prison? Families built on blood money. Their children didn't choose that." She thought of the hostile faces in the courthouse, the whispers that followed her. "We created our own orphans, our own widows." "Emily," Asher turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You can't carry everyone's pain. Your father created this situation, not you. You just brought it to light." "I know, but knowing and feeling are different things." She searched his face in the moonlight. "Do you ever regret it choosing me? Choosing this fight instead of disappearing into the frontier?" His answer came without hesitation. "Never. You showed me that running from injustice is just another form of surrender." He touched her cheek. "Besides, I'd break every law just to hold you tonight." The words hung between them, weighted with all they'd survived. Emily rose on her toes, kissing him with all the desperation and love of their terrible journey. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw her own fierce devotion reflected in his eyes. "I'd do it all again," she whispered. "Every choice, every loss, every battle, because it led me to you. My brave girl." He pulled her back against his chest, both of them facing the city. "Whatever tomorrow brings, we face it together." They stood in silence, watching the night deepen. Then Emily noticed something riders approaching the base of the rock, moving with purpose even in darkness. "Company," Asher murmured, hand moving to his gun. But as the riders grew closer, Emily recognized the lead figure. "It's Maria." Maria Santos climbed to their position, barely winded despite the steep ascent. "Thought I'd find you here. Emily always did like her high places." She nodded to Asher. "We need to talk." "What's wrong?" Emily asked, reading tension in Maria's posture. "Maybe nothing, maybe everything." Maria glanced back at the city. "My people have been watching. There's movement tonight, men gathering at the old Presidio warehouse. Armed men. How many? 20, maybe 30. Some are relatives of the convicted men. Others are hired guns from Texas." Maria's face was grim. "They're planning something for tomorrow." Asher cursed softly. "The courthouse." "That's my guess. Either to influence the judge's decision or to respond to it." Maria pulled out a folded paper. "But there's more. This came through my contacts in Mexico City." Emily read by moonlight, her blood chilling. It was a bank draft for $50,000, drawn on a Mexican bank, payable to operational expenses in Santa Fe. The authorizing signature made her stomach drop. "Richard Presidio, Rico's brother." She looked up. He's funding the appeals from Mexico. The Presidio cartel lost millions when the smuggling operation collapsed, Maria explained. They want revenge, and they want the territory to go back to the old ways. Easier to move contraband through corrupt officials than honest ones. We have to warn Coleman, Emily said. Already done. He's mobilizing federal marshals, calling in troops from Fort Union. Maria's expression softened slightly. But Emily, he wanted me to tell you, you don't have to be there tomorrow. You've done enough. Let others finish this fight. Emily felt Asher's arms tighten around her, protective and supportive. For a moment, she let herself imagine it, stepping back, returning to California, living in peace on their ranch. It would be so easy. No, she said quietly. I started this. I'll see it through. Maria smiled, unsurprised. Thought you'd say that. In that case, we need a plan. They talked strategy until dawn painted the eastern sky pink as they prepared to descend. Emily took one last look at the city below. Somewhere down there, forces were gathering, some for justice, some for revenge. The final battle for Santa Fe's soul was about to begin. The courthouse square was packed by the time they arrived. Federal marshals formed a protective cordon, rifles visible, faces alert. Emily saw army uniforms too. Coleman had indeed called in reinforcements, but she also saw the hard faces Maria had warned about. Men who stood too still and watched too carefully. Inside, every seat was filled. Emily took her place at the prosecution table, Asher beside her as always, across the aisle. Rathbone conferred with his clients, confidence radiating from every gesture. Judge Harrison entered precisely at 9, his face revealing nothing. Before I render my decision on the appeals, I must address the extraordinary security measures required today. Any disruption of these proceedings will be met with immediate arrest. He shuffled papers, the sound loud in the silent courtroom. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, I find no grounds to overturn the original convictions. The evidence presented by Mrs. Vane and others was credible, extensively corroborated, and properly handled. The appeals are denied. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered. Others shouted in outrage. Emily saw Rathbone's face twist with fury. Saw men in the gallery reaching inside their coats. "Gun!" Asher shouted, pulling Emily down as shots rang out. Chaos exploded. Federal marshals rushed forward as armed men tried to storm the bench. Gunfire echoed off marble walls. Emily found herself pressed behind an overturned table, Asher shielding her with his body as bullets splintered wood above their heads. "Stay down." He had his Colt out, returning fire at a man who'd gotten too close. Through the melee, Emily saw Maria leading a charge from the side door, her people, armed and ready, catching the attackers in crossfire. The battle was brief but vicious. When the smoke cleared, 7 men lay dead or wounded. Rathbone cowered behind his desk, all Harvard sophistication forgotten. "Is anyone hurt?" Judge Harrison emerged from behind his bench, remarkably calm for a man who'd just survived an assassination attempt. "Mrs. Vane." "I'm fine." Emily stood on shaking legs, surveying the devastation. "Is it over?" "This part is—" Marshal Coleman appeared, blood on his sleeve but moving steadily. "We've arrested the Presidio agents at the warehouse, found enough weapons to outfit a small army." Emily felt suddenly exhausted, the weight of months of fighting crashing down. Asher caught her as she swayed, holding her steady. "It's done," he murmured. "Really done this time." Outside, they found the square transformed. Citizens had poured out, some to gawk at the damage, others to show support. The old Mexican woman who'd first applauded Emily stood near the courthouse steps. "Señora Vane," she called out. "Gracias, my son. He can rest now. Justice, it is served." Others echoed her words. Not everyone. Santa Fe would need time to heal, to accept its new reality. But enough. Enough to show that truth had won, that courage had mattered. As they walked through the crowd, Emily felt something shift inside her. The burden she'd carried since finding those documents in her father's study finally began to lift. She'd done what she'd set out to do. The corrupt were imprisoned, the innocent freed, her mother avenged. "Ready to go home?" Asher asked softly. Emily looked back once at the courthouse, at the city that had shaped her and nearly destroyed her. Then she faced west, toward California, toward their ranch, toward the future they'd fought to earn. "Yes," she said simply. "Let's go home." They left that afternoon. No fanfare, no grand farewell. Just two people who'd changed history climbing aboard a westbound train. As Santa Fe faded behind them, Emily pulled out her mother's ring, now worn on a chain beside Asher's mother's ring. "They would have liked each other," she said. "Our mothers, both strong women who defied convention. They raised us well," Asher agreed, pulling her close. "Taught us to fight for what matters." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the train's rhythm, hearing the whistle call across empty lands. Behind them lay blood and justice, truth and consequences. Ahead lay California sunshine, honest work, the simple pleasure of building something clean and good. "I love you," she said against his shoulder. "Thank you for believing in me when I barely believed in myself." "Always," he promised. "I'd break every law just to hold you tonight, remember?" She smiled, the words that had once been desperate now transformed into a promise of enduring love. They'd broken laws, both legal and social. They'd shattered expectations and rebuilt justice. And in the end, they'd found each other. The train carried them west through gathering dusk, toward home, toward peace, toward all the tomorrows they'd earned with blood and courage. Emily Vane closed her eyes and let the past fall away. The future was waiting, and it was golden as California sunshine. In Santa Fe, the lights came on one by one, illuminating a city forever changed. Somewhere, her father's grave lay unmarked and unmourned. But in the courthouse, in the federal offices, in the homes of those finally free, candles burned for justice served and truth revealed. The judge's daughter was gone. Emily Vane lived. And that was enough. That was everything. That was justice. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Emily and Asher's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while telling it. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts about their story. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover this story. Until next time, partners.